This is Dawna Williams-Landis, and here is my Substack for Friday, July 18. I decided to write a little bit about some of the rules that you learn as you grow up and how they change as you age. When I was in the age range of 7 to 15, board games and playing cards were extremely popular. There was no such thing as a computer, an iPad, or tablet for individual playtime, and we had to learn the rules of games and develop our critical thinking skills to engage with friends and family members in trying to win. My grandmother and I played books, or more commonly called Go Fish, and my grandma would teach me to be extremely focused and attentive to what was in my hand and potentially hers so I could win. I learned some real time strategies while playing cards, and my grandma would gently correct my mistakes so I would learn how to win. I also loved listening to music and playing a lot of solitaire games too. Same goal, to win, but by knowing and following the rules and what winning the game was all about. None of these goalposts changed, and if they did, it was cheating. As a young person, learning to follow rules, it was important, and my parents and grandparents ensured that I understand that life was full of rules. Cheating in the adult world had real world consequences. As I got older, the games changed from board games and cards to sports and other types of competitions. In elementary school and up into junior high, we, the boys and the girls, co ed, had various activities on the blacktop area during recesses, such as tetherball, basketball, marbles, and foursquare. Of course, there were rules to ensure everyone performed on an equal level with consistent standards. This provided a sense of fairness for each player, knowing that they won or lost because of their individual skill level and not because they ignored or took unfair advantage of the agreed upon guidelines for the game. Personally, I loved shooting marbles and playing basketball. I started playing marbles with all the boys initially, and they very mercifully gave me a couple of marbles of my own in order to play since I didn't have any. Depending on who was playing, we all agreed upon a set of rules in order to make the game fair for everyone. There were no special provisions for the girl players, and we all had the same abilities to play. I did end up winning quite a bit, and I scored some really nice marbles of all sizes and repaid my original donors with some really cool marbles. I enjoyed it, but then I discovered basketball. The boys didn't play as much as a team, but the girls formed several teams by mixing the age groups evenly to give everyone a fair and exciting game. I loved playing, but eventually I wasn't getting taller like my female peers, and basketball became a non starter for me. Some of my teammates ended up playing in high school and competed with other schools for the honors of winning seasons. Yet I was always ready for a pickup game or just shooting hoops solo. By the time I got into high school, competition and following rules took on an entirely different appearance and meaning. It was no longer co ed and became very competitive. There was more at stake during these years, and one of my goals was to be selected to be on drill team that followed behind the marching band and performing a routine. You had to prepare and try out for the team. So I worked hard and did the tryouts and was selected for my freshman year of high school. I call these the transition years, where the sting of not making it for a position on a team or a group became a disappointment to learn to deal with it in a healthy way. This was an introduction to the hardest parts of being an adult, learning how to accept loss and disappointment, yet being able to pick yourself back up and continue discerning where you fit into the activities and social groups in school. Yet, regardless of where you finished in high school, once you graduated with that diploma, you were again at the bottom of the totem pole, looking around for the next step up in the ladder of life. Now, I'm not a psychologist or a sociologist, but somewhere along the line, artificial divisions began to develop that had nothing to do with following the rules to make the game fair. I could feel it when I entered college and the workforce. It was evident in ways I could not was not familiar with, and I found out how sheltered I was by my family from the really cold and hard realities of living. There were not so subtle differences in expectations for the various socioeconomic divisions of students, the different expectations for women and men, different expectations for different races, nationalities, and ethnic groups. Knowing that we all grew up with rules and procedures to ensure fairness, somehow the game changed, and the understood rules and subtle rules became less fair and far more complicated. In my very first semester at San Diego State University in 1979, I had an English class that was not the literature genre, but more an analysis of the structure of the language. The first thing this professor asked me was, "How long do you think it will take for you to get your MRS degree?" My jaw dropped, and I was confused by this sexist question. Why would anyone spend thousands of dollars on a college degree just to find a spouse? I felt this comment may have been just a one off by an old white male professor, but then there was the second semester. I had to work while in college to pay for books, tuition, and car expenses. San Diego State was 25 miles from my home, and I had to commute and not live on campus. It just wasn't an option. In addition to my newspaper job in Chula Vista, I got a job with the San Diego State Daily Aztec. It was very similar to the job I was already doing, but it was much easier. At the end of the semester, the nighttime manager was graduating, so I applied for his job. I was called in for an interview and it went very well. Therefore, I thought I would most certainly be hired for this position. Toward the end of the interview, the two editors announced that they were going to hire the other candidate, Howard, that had applied for the job. Howard was also a coworker of mine at the Chula Vista newspaper, and he had also applied for the job. The editor's reasoning for the selection was that Howard was a man and he has bills, so he needs the job. I did inform that I had exponentially more experience than Howard, and gee, I had bills too. Their minds were made up, and I was excused. I was only a freshman in college and faced a sexist and misogynistic world my first year in an institution of higher learning. I would like to say things got better, but they did not. As a female, I had to work extremely hard just to get the scraps from a career table. Yet I still firmly believed in the rules and that the rules of getting a degree, working hard, being dedicated would ultimately pay off. I was wrong. At 65, I've found that rules and fairness do not seem to apply to men. An empirical observation of men from antiquity up to the present reveals a deeply entrenched entitlement attitude. I theorize that this faulty trait of self importance, superiority, and greed emanates from a millennia of interpretations of religious and other documents to ensure men maintain their positions of power, control, and access to have and hoard money and property. This behavior contributes heavily to an us versus them society, with men at the apex of power determining who is worthy and who is not. With the Christian Bible as a backdrop and justification, Scripture has been used and internalized to confer the seed of God to men in the absence of a physical, human like specimen of God. After all, God is depicted in European paintings as an old white haired man. Because of this unspoken interpretation, our human history has been dominated by a gender that believes they are sitting in the judgment seat of God and are the de facto judges of determining who's acceptable to God and who is not. It is not God talking through these men. It is men who are using our great Creator as a vehicle to carry out their own human decisions. It adds an aura of legitimacy to justify their human desires to declare war, to steal, rape, pillage, and destroy all of God's creation. In political science terms, I'd surmise that our global society is firmly ensconced in a path dependent pattern. It may be different men, different eras, different nations, but similar circumstances that are created by those who seek to rule the world and inflict their personal weaknesses, biases, and opinions onto society. Despite their misguided belief that that their way is the only way, the results are always the same as their predecessors. Things are never made better, and the problems are never solved. Over the past couple weeks, I've been very angry beyond words. Elected and appointed men in the highest level of U.S. government have been exercising their entitlement and their perceived authority as a pinch hitter for God. And they are targeting minorities, the handicapped, and women of all stripes as a detriment to U.S. society. Things were allegedly better when blacks and women did not vote. Voting now should be by household, where white men are the head of the house. Thereby, they vote for other white men on the behalf of the entire household. While white entitled men were riding on their laurels, watching porn and drinking beer, women and minorities were attending college and becoming scholars, scientists, public servants, and those that the world would need to move past the toddler stage of human existence. Their hard work was unnoticed until we enjoyed the first black president, and the birth of a new reality and new hope began to appear in the gloom of the same old, same old. Just look at history. Things never change with entitled men, always finding ways to control everything and everyone, using the trope of God's will is speaking through me to provide some mystical quality to their own plans that always fail. If it was truly God inspired, it would not fail. The paradigm must shift and the path dependency must end if this world is to become the world the real God intended. We must have all the humble voices at the table to determine the course for our entire civilization if we want to break the violent and hateful pattern of war, greed, and control. It goes without saying, though, the arrogant and entitled men must step down and let the adults come into the room and clean up the mess of the last 5,000 years. Have a great weekend.